Hey guys, Scripture here with another video. I caught the beginning of this, and so I thought this would be a really funny one to do, because this is a reaction to a reaction of a reaction. So basically, Asmongold is reacting to the Critical Drinkers video about Kathleen Kennedy's sort of legacy or whatever. He calls his video, "She Ruined Star Wars and Left," which is pretty accurate. But let's see what he has to say, because he does have one take at the beginning here that I did catch before I decided to do this video that I was somewhat disappointed in. Let's just see what happens.
Yeah, other people have arguably committed worse crimes against cinema, but Kennedy did it first and
she did it systematically and at a large scale. I think that's the difference.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and at the end of the day, not only did she do it large scale, she oversaw these movies and was okay with the direction they were going. And somehow in her mind thought that what they did in these movies was a good thing. Like, to totally change Star Wars, break the lore, wreck Luke, wreck Han, wreck Leia. Just oodles of wreck space battles, wreck the Force, wreck just everything. Wreck training in the Force. Like everything you could destroy was destroyed under her watch. She didn't technically make the movies, but she greenlit what they did. When Rian Johnson submitted his script and it showed Luke Skywalker as a complete and utter bumhole who doesn't care about the Force anymore, and all of a sudden now hates the Jedi based on stuff from the past that he had no involvement in, and had a very strange and modern Disney interpretation of what the Jedi were doing in the prequels. He submitted that to her, and she said, yeah, that makes sense. This is somebody George Lucas knew very well. She should have a very clear idea about what really went on with the Jedi, and how they were manipulated by a Sith, how they made mistakes, but they didn't overtly do things evil. They just made mistakes in the prequels. But it wasn't out of trying to do bad things or ruin the Republic or ruin the galaxy. It was a benevolent perspective. They just made mistakes. And I think that's a great commentary on humanity. That's another timeless theme where the road to hell is paved with good intentions. You could have the right attitude and the right intentions, but if you're not paying close enough attention, you can still make bad decisions. We all have dealt with that in life. Unless you're just an evil piece of crap, and let's listen to this. But we've all dealt with that in life. That's another George Lucas timeless theme. And the fact that that was submitted to her, and she thought that that was a good idea to misinterpret that and make Luke the way he was, is ultimately on her. Because she could have said, Ryan, no. Like, wait a sec here. You know, if Luke's going to have these issues, they got to be way toned down. And there's got to be a much better reason for him to feel this way than this. And then, no, we're not going to have him thinking about killing his nephew, Ryan. Like, that's, if you want to go down the road where he's struggling, and he's struggling with his being a Jedi or whatever, or the Jedi period, you got to think of better reasons than these. These are not going to work for us. Because it doesn't match with what we're doing here. But she didn't, so ultimately it is her fault.
Yes.
Am I the only person that, like, I thought that it was so stupid? Like, if I was going to tier list the characters that are the ones that I like the most in, like, the new Star Wars trilogy, I would go Kylo Ren, Finn, and then maybe some other random extra, and then after that I'd say Rey. Like, I like both of them way more.
Wait, are you... okay, he said tier list. Because, like, there's not a whole lot to like with any of them. So I hope he's not saying that he likes the character of Kylo Ren. I mean, what's to like? He's all over the place. He's like... I don't see a guy like Asmongold relating to some emo kid who's 30 years old pretending he's 17. There's no way he's into that. And pouting at Rey and simping. And then Finn had potential, but they didn't do anything with him, so his character sucked too. There's no way he thinks that. Asmongold. Asmodeus, dude. No. I hope that's not what you're saying, that you liked those characters. Because that would be super duper disappointing if that was the case. I'd have to call into question your taste in movie characters, if that is the case.
Was overseeing
good for her
Steven
age. She
Spielberg's
does,
troubled
actually.
comedy
She does.
movie 1941.
I mean, the reason why she looks so good for her age is because she never stressed out about making good movies. She never stressed herself out about, oh, wow, am I destroying the franchise? She never even think about that. Yeah, she didn't worry about it.
Yeah, yeah. She doesn't look like somebody that's been, like, worrying too much about really anything. And even to the last day seemed quite cheerful, almost as if just, like, living on a whole other planet. And lack of self-awareness is a very real thing, especially in the entertainment business. And we see this all the time, and it's not just like you'll see that with famous actors and actresses making really stupid comments about topics that they have no idea anything about them, whether it's political or social or anything, right? These people are living in gated communities. They're completely protected. They have security, most of them, private security. And then they'll be like anti-Second Amendment or something, right? Like, so they're totally lacking self-awareness. And in her case, yeah, I mean, she didn't do any of that type of stuff. Although, well, she did fire Gina Carano. So that, she didn't say a whole heck of a lot, but she did do that. But even without that, the lack of self-awareness about what she was doing and how fans were reacting, which is wild too when you think about like the era we live in now, where like you can go online and you can see how your fans of your franchise are reacting to what you're doing to it, like instantly and in real time. There's people that were doing live streams of the shows on Disney Plus literally at midnight the moment they came out. Big Star Wars channels doing live streams with thousands of people commenting as the show is playing its first time for the fans. So the fact that you would be that removed from the way people were thinking, and then on top of that, I'm assuming this, but latching onto the smaller group of opinions that were pro what you were doing, which was a smaller percentage of people. And then on top of that, seeing the numbers rolling out and the declines in the actual numbers of viewers and money and merch sales and all that stuff, you really have to be just in La La Land. That's why they call it La La Land. LA, it's La La Land. You have to be, because how could you possibly go out with a smiley face and all positive with what you've done? You go to the toy section, there's almost no Star Wars anymore. And then people say, well, kids don't play with toys anymore. Okay, well, there's also no Star Wars clothing anymore either. When you would go to any clothing store that sold kids' clothes, you would find Star Wars stuff. You would find Star Wars shirts, Star Wars this. You did have a little bit of that with Grogu. That's faded. And once in a while, you might come across, a hat and a t-shirt with a Star Wars logo at Target or something like that. But that's very, very minimal compared to what it used to be, what it was when they bought the IP. It's just not even in the same hemisphere. And for her to be just all smiles and going out, believing in her mind that she did a great job with all of this information available to her is ludicrous. And also, yeah, it makes sense that she still looks this good at her age after, 12 or whatever, 14 years of taking the piss.
I remember Kathy came into the room with her steno pad and her pencil, and she was horrible at taking notes, and she was terrible, and she didn't really know how to do it very well. Yeah. But what she did know how to do was interrupt somebody in mid-sentence. We'd be pitching ideas back and forth, and Kathy, who's supposed to be writing these ideas down, suddenly put her pencil down and would say something like, and what if he didn't get the girl, but instead he got the dog?
What?
Right.
Well, and this is a theory that somebody said to me that might actually be true. Because here's the thing. George Lucas and Steven Spielberg are buddies, right? They've worked together on stuff. They've been friends for years. ILM has done stuff for Steve's movies, and they've been around and been together for literally decades. These guys have been buddies. And they've both worked with Kathleen Kennedy very, very closely. You know, think of Indiana Jones, right? That's a Lucasfilm movie directed by Spielberg with Kathleen Kennedy as a producer. So all three of them were there together. That's 3 movies. Right? 4, I guess, if you include that crappy Alien one. Should have just ended after The Last Crusade, in my opinion, but whatever. But George should know all this stuff that Steven's saying, if this stuff is true, that she's kind of annoying. She was trying to push herself onto the creative side and shouldn't have been doing that because she had no idea what she was doing and things of that nature. Which would also mean, by the way, that she would not be very good at choosing creatives either, right? Like choosing the Knives Out guy or choosing somebody who wrecked Star Trek, or, you know what I mean? Like, she would choose the wrong people because she's not a good creative, so therefore she would choose the wrong creative, right? Even if she put her hands up and said, you guys do whatever you want, you still chose those guys. But the theory is that George pushed for her to be the head of Lucasfilm and was already grooming her into that role before Disney bought it because he planned on selling it. This is the theory. And that he knew she would run the brand into the ground and he'd ride off into the sunset with his money and everyone would realize that the prequels didn't suck as bad as they thought they did because now look at how bad it's gotten. Some people theorize that that's why he pushed for that. Which, based on the fact that he was so close to Steve and this is how they thought of her, it could be true. I don't know, but it could be true. It's an interesting theory, I'll say that. Very interesting theory.
Spielberg, though, for whatever reason,
How'd this
took a
happen?
liking to her and hired her as his personal assistant for Raiders of the Lost Ark. Now, she might have been shit at taking
know.
notes.
Yeah, like, that's weird. It's weird, right? Like, if she's annoying and you don't really like what she does and she's in your ear all the time and crappy at taking notes, why would you make her your personal assistant? I don't want to say what it could be, but you gotta wonder, right? It's pretty weird. Why would you do that? I understand if she's working for a studio and you don't have control over that. Maybe they're hiring her for whatever reason. She's good at other things. But your personal assistant and she can't take notes properly? Ooh, that's weird, man. That's why Asmongold just kind of sat there, because he didn't want to say what we're all thinking, like, why would that be? That's weird. So he just kind of sat there.
The
It's
pattern
incredible.
for her career was now set, and she would act as producer for nearly all of Spielberg's movies for the next 30 years. She wasn't what you would call a creative person, because she didn't really need to be. Her
Yeah.
job was to facilitate other people's creative visions, organize...
Which, by the way, that's totally fine. Like, a producer is, in some cases, more important than a director. Like, I remember whenever I would try to record things, and, like, we had this other guy, like a friend of mine, and he would basically do the producing of it. And, like, this guy just made everything work better. And when we didn't have him, nothing happened. Like, literally just nothing happened.
Yeah, and I've said this for a really long time. If you've been following my channel, this is why she was there all the time. So she must have been very good at the logistics, at putting scenes together on budget and letting, and having the available resources for the creatives that she was working under. That's a very important job, and she must have been good at that. That doesn't mean you know how to run a company, although it should lend itself to some degree of organization, although it's been a disaster at Lucasfilm. It would not lead to knowing how to be a smart creative, but she obviously knew what she was doing to some degree in that regard, or she wouldn't have been there. That's just the simple fact of the matter. You can't deny that. And Asmongold's right. Like, the behind-the-scenes people are very, very important in projects. I mean, that's just a fact. If you took somebody like Mr. Beast, for example, and removed the behind-the-scenes people that help him do what he does, he's a kid saying Logan Paul 10,000 times into a camera, right? Like, that's really, right? Because he doesn't know how to build all that stuff and set all that stuff up and follow all the safety procedures they would have to follow, all the different stuff they'd have to follow so he doesn't get sued, right? We've heard stuff about people not getting food and different things at some of his events. I don't know how true all that is, but, the people behind the scenes are the ones that are supposed to be dealing with that stuff. And all that stuff has to take place. You can't not follow all of those protocols and regulations. And then on top of that, figure out how to get this done on budget and on time, and giving Mr. Beast or whoever, Asmongold or whoever, the resources they need to fulfill the creative vision. That's just the reality of the situation. And I will always say, as ridiculous as Kathleen Kennedy has been as the head of Lucasfilm, you can't take that away from her. You can't. You can say she's not a creative, because she's not. Steven knew that. We all know that. It's been proven. But you can't take away her abilities as a producer. She does know what she's doing. I don't know how anyone could see it any other way. The problem is you get people on all the way one way and all the way the other. She's just amazing at everything. You had people tweeting when she retired about how she's responsible for Jurassic Park. And Buddy was like, dude, she didn't do the music, she didn't do the directing, it was written by this guy, the screenplay was written by the same guy. Yeah, it listed all the stuff. It's like, no, dude, she was the producer. But it's like people have to be all the way, she was the reason for all of it, or she's just a complete useless tit who doesn't know how to do anything. And the truth is in the middle. She's a good producer. She just isn't a good creative. It's okay. You can have a smart, nuanced opinion about it. You don't have to be like a cheerleader on either side.
I do think that it's funny that, once again, it's another woman who basically gets every advantage handed to her by men, that then whenever they finally have an opportunity to make their own content, it's all about female empowerment. And your videos about female empowerment are garbage because you never got empowered because of anything else other than, I don't know, some other bullshit, right? Maybe you're good at your job, maybe not. But I do think that anytime that I see an attractive person, like an attractive young female that's in a position that's a very, very high level position, and it's by, like, they've been put in that position by an older guy, like, maybe this is unfair. But I do have a bias there. I do.
Well, that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. Like, Steven's complaining about her, but then makes her his personal assistant. Again, I'm not saying anything necessarily, but it is kind of weird. I don't think it was necessarily handed to her. She had to have been bringing something to the table. That's where I disagree with Asmongold there to some extent. But in a way, they did give her those positions, right? So in a sense, maybe it wasn't handed to her in that way, but if not for them giving it to her, she wouldn't have had it, right? I guess is the argument. And as far as what he says before that, the girl power stuff, yeah, I mean, I have to think to some extent that Kathy just really felt sort of marginalized, right? Like the way Steven talked about her earlier in the video, right? Where, she's trying to chime in and say, oh, you should do this with the story. And then he's like, no, that's dumb. We're not doing that. Can you just take notes, please? And I think, working under these guys for decades, and they're all extremely successful and making these huge blockbuster movies, I could see how you would feel marginalized. But the problem is that's still kind of a selfish thought process, because you really should just be happy to be there. You get to say you were a producer on these crazy, culturally huge films. You shouldn't be like, oh, woe is me, we need to bring in female empowerment. Like, that's where you turn into an idiot. And the fact is that is what she did. She bragged about having, more female staff, at least 50%, and her new, the person that Lucasfilm just made the co-president did the same thing at ILM. She took away all the qualifications and hired all of her friends, and then you look at Ray and you look at all the self-inserts that Kathleen Kennedy's done, and whether she did that on purpose or not, when you look at some of the rhetoric and then how she went after fans and stuff too, the ists and the phobes and the Gina Carano thing and everything else. And you start to think that, yeah, she really had an agenda going in, and it wasn't just to make really good content, it was to send messages to people and make people think a certain way, which of course backfired heavily.
Colleagues and friends, and stayed that way for decades. Maybe not so much today, though. And in the case of the latter, they were married by 1987. As you can probably imagine, having close personal relationships with three of the most powerful and respected men in the business did wonders for her career.
Surely the different industry that was exposed by Harvey Weinstein and all the other types of bad behavior in Hollywood with, like, Diddy and everything, surely nothing like that ever happens. Surely, there's no way anything like that ever happens. I'm not saying that's what happened, But I am saying that like people that gain advantages that way, I think that their perception on what empowerment is and what a hero's journey is not really in line with what the average person believes.
I will say this. That would give you a warped perspective. Is it possible that there was things that happened in that regard, that way? Maybe. And if they did, and if this was sort of a Kamala Harris situation, I know some of you are Democrats, and that's fine, but she did do the deed with some people. That's a known fact. You think of the mayor of Chicago, things of that nature that definitely boosted her career. I'm not saying that's what happened here. I am not saying that. I'm simply saying that does happen. And if it happened, it would give you a warped perspective of what female empowerment is. And it would make it difficult, probably, or at least more difficult for you than the average person to understand the hero's journey and writing a good story with said female character. Or any character for that matter. You would have struggles with that because your life turned into what it turned into for reasons that weren't the way that that person would, the hero journey would be. If that's the case. I'm not sure that's the case per se, but we can all agree that the whole Rey thing and the female empowerment thing is 100% accurate. It's proven.
Well, by 2012, he was getting old and burned out after making the Star Wars prequels and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Disney were offering to buy up Lucasfilm from him, and he was very much tempted by the offer, but what he really needed was a safe pair of hands to leave the company in.
Yeah,
and
sure.
from his point of view, Kennedy seemed like the perfect choice. He knew her personally, he trusted her, and when it came to experience, there was nobody who could rival her. So, in late 2012, the deal was done. Disney bought over Lucasfilm, and Kathleen Kennedy was installed as president of the company.
Damn. 2012.
A move that few people took
forgot it
issue
was
with
that
at
long
the time.
ago.
That, however, would soon change. Things started out well, at least. J.J.
Yeah.
Abrams, arguably the safest pair of hands in the business at the time, delivered a massive box office hit with The Force Awakens, the first movie in a new Star Wars trilogy. Yet
I feel like there's like no chance this would have gone badly. I mean, you brought back Harrison Ford playing fucking what's his name, Han Solo. You've got this cool new lightsaber. This is the first Star Wars movie in like 20 years. Like, there's no way this was going to go bad, really. Like, I mean, I don't see it happening.
Yeah, well, from a box office perspective, it was guaranteed going to make money. I mean, there's just absolutely no possible way. You have another Star Wars movie with potentially OT characters now. So the prequels were one thing, right? You had Obi-Wan in there and stuff, but you're dealing with Luke, Han, and Leia now. Like, you're gonna have a successful first movie, pretty much no matter what you do. But just because it made money didn't mean it didn't piss people off. And Rey pissed people off. Big time. Her beating Kylo Ren pissed people off. Right? He wasn't too bad in this movie other than that. You know what? Of the three films, Kylo Ren's character in the first one, in TFA, isn't that bad. It's still corny. But most of the negative about him and his character is attributed to Rey being overpowered. If he beats her in that first thing and instead of killing her tries to recruit her or something like that, that would have changed a lot of people's perspectives. And actually it would have changed a lot of people's perspectives even on her. Because yes, she would still be way too OP and way too much force powers without any training, but she did lose that fight. He's more powerful than her. You've made established boundaries that, although would be unsettling and I still wouldn't like a lot of it, that would have at least made more sense. So they did, but they didn't do that, right? And that's a big part of why The Last Jedi did so poorly as well, was because there were people that were not happy with that, especially with Rey. But it was guaranteed going to be a success. You could have had a monkey making that movie. I mean, yeah, okay, you took the, quote, safe bet in J.J. Abrams, but was it really that safe? I don't know. Like, he really ticked off Star Trek fans and stuff. Like, I don't know if it was that safe, really. And now we know he had no plan or anything, so it's just kind of like, I don't know.
The following year, Rogue One proved that Star Wars could release spin-offs and prequels to the main story that were still financially viable, allowing
I thought Rogue One was good, honestly, I did. And it's weird that, you know, I don't know why. It seems like a lot of the stories that they told that were like not the mainline ones were better. Like I've heard good things about Mandalorian and people like Andor a lot, but it's just the main movies were, I think, mediocre.
Well, Asmon, that's not entirely true because Andor did not get very high viewership and they spent a lot of money on it. It is, I would say, yes, definitely more liked than, I don't know, probably all the other shows other than maybe Mando season 1 and 2 probably, I guess, right? That's an argument that can be made. But it also broke from the traditional style of Star Wars, so it brought in a lot of people that just never really liked Star Wars. So what are we going to say? So let's say Andor brings in a bunch of people that never really liked Star Wars, and I know that for a fact because there's people on Twitter and stuff that's saying it's better than the OT. So you didn't like Star Wars, right? But you like Andor. But how many fans walked away after seeing Andor that created that offset, which made it so it actually didn't have a ton of viewership? It did okay, but do you know what I'm saying? Somebody had to have walked away because they brought in a whole class of new fans with that show. They did. So where did the old fans go? It should have had very high viewership, and it didn't. So you can't say, you certainly can't say it was objectively good. I mean, it is to some people, so it's subjectively good. But yeah, I mean, the other shows are really terrible, other than, I guess, Mando season 1 and 2. Although even then, you had Grogu, which was just so overpowered. Like, I don't know what is with them and the overpowered superhero force powers, man. It's way too much. As far as Rogue One, I did a video about Rogue One. There's issues in there. It's not a cut and dry issue. There's plot problems. There's plot problems how it relates to the prequels. You know, the one thing that was just awful in it, I'm just going to say this one thing, because overall, it's not a horrible movie. To me, it's just meh. But the beginning of the movie, the girl character sees her dad, who's going to put this weakness in the Death Star. How he would even get away with that, it makes no sense to me. Their plans were done in Attack of the Clones, and there's millions of people working on it. Somebody's going to notice you dicking around with the plans. I've been involved in construction. Like, there's no possible way that even be possible. But let's say it was. He does this hologram letter to his daughter and lays out the entire plot of the movie we're about to watch. Tells her where to go, when to go, how to go, who to go with. Like, it's just like, oh, okay, that's what the movie's going to be. And then you watch the movie. It was like, okay. And, you know, I think the Kyle Katarn would have been a cool storyline to use, you know what I mean, to adapt that. I thought it was more compelling, more complicated than this movie was. Anyway, that's just my opinion, but I see why people like it. I mean, it does have a lot of the good traditional Star Wars feel to it, which, again, is so different from Andor, which is the show based on a character from Rogue One. Rogue One definitely has the Star Wars feel to it. Andor is very much off in a different direction, far more sort of modern drama style. But yeah, I can see why people like Rogue One.
It's not like one of these things where, like, oh, the people that are the artists are better than the people that are logistics. I don't believe that at all. I think that actually, like, both of these are equal and just as valuable as each other, but you have to have both of them. And you have to have a person that is able to understand both of those that's in the highest level of leadership position.
Yeah, well, and that's illustrated perfectly with George. Because George ran Lucasfilm. He understood the business end, and he was also a creative. I would make the argument that the business side got a little too big, and it was a little much, and I think that combined with a lot of yes men on the prequels led to some not so great decisions. Went pretty childish, especially with the first one. Corrected some of that stuff in Attack of the Clones and certainly in Revenge of the Sith. But I do think that that's why Star Wars was successful under George, was because he was both of those things. He hired Kathy to produce, but he was also pretty darn good at the logistics end of things as well on his own right. And that's why he ran that company, and that's why that company was such a successful company. Whereas Kathy has no creative vision. So, and the problem is even if we say, okay, well, she didn't do any of that. She was hands off. Even if we take that argument and say she was hands off, there wasn't an agenda, even though we know there was. Dave Filoni's verified it. They've all verified it. to turn Star Wars more female-centric. They, even if none of that was true, she's still responsible for greenlighting crappy ideas. At the end of the day, that's just a fact. She greenlit those stupid ideas, and you needed somebody that could do the logistics and the creative end. Now, I would also argue, though, that her abilities as a producer logistically did not translate very well to running the company. And dealing with writers and directors, there's been so many problems and so many issues and so many projects failing, just insecure decision making, unsure if they should continue to make feature films. Maybe we should do streaming series. Now we're making Mando into a movie. Now there's rumors they're going to make Lando into a show or into a movie, and when it was originally a show, and it's all over the place. So you would think, I think, that logistically she would have been okay. But she just wasn't really good at that either. She's a good producer, not running a company, and definitely not on the creative side. So really, you ended up with kind of neither, but you definitely didn't end up with somebody with a creative vision at all.
It was a strong creative vision
Just
for where she wanted to take the franchise and how she was going to get it there. She needed to plan and map out release schedules for multiple films with directors and writers that were actually suited to the projects in hand. She needed to keep people on track, monitor progress, and juggle multiple projects at the same time. She needed to be a leader now, not a facilitator.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is where it all started to go wrong.
Well, and that's just it. A leader, not a facilitator. And she was a facilitator the whole time. Like, even if you bring up the fact that she wanted to make sure she hired a certain percentage of women and all that stuff, that's facilitating those people. That's not leading. Leading is simply best candidate for the job. I have a creative vision of where we're going to go with this. I have a vision for how often and how many and whatever projects we're going to do, when we're going to do them, how we're going to do them, all that stuff. That's what a leader does, but she kind of was a facilitator. Like, even comments like, tell your own story, Leslie. You know, the woman who did The Acolyte. Well, no, that's not what a leader says. That's what a facilitator says. That's what a producer says. Yeah, do your vision and I'll take care of the logistics for you. And that's not going to work as the head of Lucasfilm. It will work as a producer, but not as the head of Lucasfilm. Because you had to have that singular vision when you stepped into that ring, and that just didn't exist. We knew that right away because we had The Force Awakens, and then Rian Johnson completely went into a total opposite direction with everything. Look what he did with Finn and stuff. Just everything just went completely this other direction. So that was her facilitating what Rian wanted to do rather than leading and saying, well, no, Rian, we can't go that direction. Because the vision, and this is a good example for you, okay? So they did sort of have a plan with Kylo Ren. The plan was that he would just get more and more evil until the end, and he dies at Rey's hands. That was the original plan. There was it was the opposite. So he was supposed to start off kind of evil, but wavering, which you kind of got that impression in TFA. Like he was kind of simpy still and kind of pouty. But he was, he's still pretty evil. And then in The Last Jedi, he just was all over the place. And it just became a huge simp fest for Rey. And then his entire story arc was just to make Rey the thing, rather than just being that crazy villain at the end. And then they brought back Palpatine, and it just became a complete and total mess. So she didn't have that creative vision and wasn't able to be the leader. That's the best thing I've heard in this video so far. Perfectly said by Critical Drinker. That you needed a leader, not a facilitator. And she essentially was a facilitator the entire time for her friends, right? For her friends' visions, basically. Which is what she was used to doing, which meant she probably was not the person for this position, right? Well, not probably, I mean, we know that.
Kennedy had hired up-and-coming director Rian Johnson to write and direct The Last Jedi, the second movie in the sequel trilogy. Unlike JJ, though, who was all about nostalgia and fan service, Rian was determined to shake things up and subvert fan expectations, not
I thought that was so stupid. Like, every time that somebody tries to subvert fan expectations, I think that subvert is disappoint 9 times out of 10 with a lot of people that are making movies and media now. It's just, we're going to subvert expectations by not meeting them.
Live up to them.
Yeah, I think that's true, although I think you can subvert expectations in the right way, where you can change, for example, you can change Luke Skywalker, you can subvert the expectations we had, and he can be, whatever, sad or miserable or whatever. That in and of itself is a subversion of expectations, but then you have to give a good reason so that the audience accepts that subversion. What Rian Johnson did is he said he was subverting expectations, but what he was really doing was perverting expectations, because he subverted, but then the explanation for the subversion was a further perversion of Luke's character, not a subversion, right? So again, I'm sad, I'm on this island, bad things have happened. Okay, what are those bad things? Well, they can't be, I thought about killing my nephew, because that's a perversion of his character. It could be somebody came and infiltrated my Jedi Order and burned it down, and some kids died, and I just can't forgive myself for not being more aware of what was going on and sort of taking the safety of where I was in the galaxy or whatever for granted. Okay, now the audience can say, oh, okay, well, so Luke is just devastated by what happened. That I could see happening. Like, that's awful. Like, if he woke up one morning and some of his students were killed by somebody or something like that. Oh my gosh, like, wow. And he's blaming himself and his lack of force power to feel that happening and all that stuff. Okay, I don't really like that he's this way, but I can kind of accept that he is, because if that was me or him or any character that's a good guy, yeah, I mean, that would be horrible to go through. So I can kind of believe that. So no, what Rian Johnson did was not a subversion. It was a perversion of the entire thing.
And
just how
boy,
it is.
did he ever, throwing out JJ's proposed ideas for the sequel, killing off most of his plot threads, and completely going into business for himself. Now, George Lucas probably would have stepped in at this point and told him he was being a fucking idiot, but the lack of a strong overarching plan for the sequels, combined with Kennedy's attitude of just let them get on with it, ultimately doomed the movie. TLJ turned out to be the most divisive Star Wars film of all time, completely splitting the fan base into warring factions and bringing in barely half of what Force Awakens had made. Worse,
I think that's probably true. Like, the first movie, people were generally kind of okay with it. But the second one, I feel like everybody was like, they thought it sucked. Like, I remember the choreography whenever they're fighting in like Snoke's room. I saw like a video of like people pretending like they got hit whenever they didn't even get hit.
Yup, it's bad. It's really bad. And the funniest part is the one guy that he does like sword fighting analysis or whatever. And I saw that video and he slows it down. And people are like, oh, you're just slowing it down and making it look bad. And look at Luke's kick from Return of the Jedi. And it's like, yeah, that kick was bad. Like, no one is suggesting that was good, but that was one kick. You can watch that fight scene in The Last Jedi in real time and see people just like soccer foul exaggerations to draw a pen. You know what I mean? When the guy throws his head back like he just got elbowed in the face and it's like a foot away from him. You see that like multiple times throughout that fight, even in real time. You don't have to slowing it down just makes it funnier. And the same's true in the Acolyte when they're all fighting the one guy, and multiple times the Jedi just stand there. Well, because if they're swinging at him when someone else is swinging at him, they're going to hit him. So they have to make them dumb, and they just kind of stand off to the side and wait or go over here. That happens so many times during that fight scene as well. It's just not well done. But he isn't wrong in about TFA totally either, though. Like, there were a lot of people that took exception to stuff in it, but it was generally received okay, I would argue. Like the normies thought it was okay for sure. People like me that overanalyze it and stuff, I had issues right away. I was just kind of hoping they were going to explain all the issues in The Last Jedi that I had, which of course the big one being Rey being a total Mary Sue and knowing how to fly the Falcon and all that other crap. I thought for sure they were going to go with she was a solo and they hid her there to protect her and, yada, yada, yada. And then you could kind of maybe accept some of that stuff to a degree. It still would have been OP, but at least they would have sort of explained some of that stuff. Or a better explanation, right? So, yeah, I mean, I think generally The Force Awakens was seen as okay. And I think people went back to watch it more than once, and that's why it made twice as much money as The Last Jedi. I think people went and saw The Last Jedi once, and that was it. And a lot of them, that was it for them with Star Wars in general. That was the end of it for them.
One of Kennedy's goals with Star Wars was to increase female representation on screen.
Why would that be your goal? Why would you make that a goal? How does that serve the audience? That doesn't serve the audience. That serves you.
Yeah, it sure does. It brought in a bunch of her friends and gave them jobs. And that's why a lot of us think it was all self-inserts, all these characters. You know, the brunette white chick is the power player in all these movies and stuff, Rogue One included. And a lot of us think that was sort of what she was doing, and maybe subconsciously or consciously it had to do with the fact that she always felt like she was sort of down the totem pole from these extremely successful men. But yeah, going into it with that's my goal, not my goal is to make a really incredible project for the fans, is really stupid. And I've mentioned this before. Chris Gore tweeted that, you know, turning Star Wars into a girl brand is going to destroy it. And he tweeted that years ago, and he's correct. It has destroyed it. Because even girls don't want to see OP girl characters. They can't relate to that. Like, so they don't care either. You know? Like, most girls and women cannot relate to some weirdo guy in a gimp mask seducing them to do bad things. Like, that's not super relatable. I know there's the whole, like, girls like the bad boy thing, but not to the point where you're like, yeah, I'm going to turn good. I'm going to be okay with you wiping my twin sister's mind, and so she's going to be basically lobotomized. And I'm going to kill Jedi now, even though I was friends with them and thought they were cool, because this guy in a gimp mask is convincing me to do so for reasons. Like, you know what I'm saying? No one can relate to that, male or female.
That not only would the franchise retain the inbuilt male audience, they'd also attract a brand new female audience that had been put off until now. A modern audience, you might say.
If you go back and you watch the midnight releases of, like, the old Star Wars movies in, like, the 70s, you're going to see tons of women there. This entire concept is just bullshit to begin with. It's not even true.
No, and it's not true. And one of the things that Mark Hamill did an interview a couple weeks ago or whatever, like a month ago, and he's bang on when he said, you know, like, when I read the script for Star Wars, I was shocked. Yeah, it was the one with The Rock and all those actor guys. I can't remember, Hollywood Reporter interview, I think. And he talked about how, like, he was just so impressed with the script because it was in 1976. And he was like, wow, like, Leia is very strong, independent female. She basically talks down to the men for their plans. They go to rescue her, and she's just chilling out, lounging in the cell, and then grabs a gun and basically saves them. You know, shoots a hole in the garbage chute so they can get away and stuff like that. Like, she was at no point a damsel in distress, and everybody loved it. The idea that you needed to accentuate the female character to the point of, like, so basically, here's the way I see it. So Leia was already a great standard, and still is, for a strong female character that everybody would like, right? Girls, boys, everybody would like that. But Kathy thought she had to take on this mantle of the strong female character, which was already established in the brand. There was no need to take on this mantle. So because she took on that mantle, that supposed cause, it wasn't enough for, say, Rey to just be a strong female character like Leia. She, on top of that, had to have crazy insane force powers, no training. She had to be a total crazy version of a woman that is unrealistic and dumb because she's fighting this cause that doesn't exist. If she had made Rey a realistic character, everybody would have loved her and it would have been perfectly fine. Guys and girls, nobody cared. In fact, guys I talked to, when we had a feeling that she might be a Jedi before TFA came out, that there was rumors and stuff going around that she was sort of representing the hero, the Luke character, we all were for it. We were like, good, that's great. You know, we've had lots of dudes. Let's do this. Let's have a female Jedi who's awesome in the episodic films. Absolutely. Nobody cared. But then again, because you're fighting this, you know, non-cause that you think is a cause, you make her, like, you know, Captain Marvel OP, weird, not being trained and knowing how to do stuff and everything else. because it wasn't enough to just make her a good character, because you had in your brain this overemphasis that I'm fighting this cause. And then you get somebody like Jennifer Lawrence, who's in that bubble, actually saying out loud that she was the first female action star. And that we've come such a long way. I'm the first female. Are you nuts? Remember the 80s? Even in the 70s. You had Wonder Women's and Supergirls, and you had Sarah Connors, and you had... What are you talking about? But they're in that bubble, and so she thought that she was part of a cause that didn't exist. It had already been dealt with decades ago. And the same thing with that guy saying, the Shin-Chi or whatever the heck, that Marvel superhero guy saying, I'm the first Chinese or first Asian. He's just got all different types of people, by the way. I don't know why we call Oriental people Asians, but anyways. I'm the first Asian superhero. Okay, but guess what? There's been tons of Asian or Chinese or whatever leads. Jackie Chan's whole career is him leading. Chow Yun-Fat, Bruce Lee, on and on, going back decades, going back to the 70s. So, you're just making up things to pretend you're part of this huge cause that doesn't exist. No one cares.
Kennedy's decision to take part in the Force's female...
The Force's female. Give me a fucking break. Are you kidding me?
Campaign for Nike in 2017, combined with her obvious feminist sensibilities, instantly put her in the firing line.
Yeah, that was a really dumb thing to do too, because what makes the Force awesome to everybody, whether you're whatever you are, doesn't even matter, is that it's for everybody. It's not just for females or anybody else. Now, I get what they were trying to do, and maybe you could make the argument that it was tongue-in-cheek, but then when you see what happened in the films and in the Disney Plus stuff and everything, you're like, oh, well, that they actually think this. They think this is a cause. The Force is the Force. It's not a gendered thing, right? And that had already been well established. You had Ahsoka. Ahsoka's got the second most screen time of any Star Wars character in history. I think it's second to Anakin. I could be wrong with that, but you let me know if you include Clone Wars. It might be more now with her show and everything. So that was established again decades ago. So you're making a cause out of thin air to feel good about yourself, I guess. But I like Asmongold. Are you kidding me? And that's how we all felt. We were like, really? This is so cheese. And if that was all it was, if it was just this stupid campaign, fine, whatever. But then, like I said, when we saw what was going on screen, and then you couple it with that, you're like, oh, they really did think they were doing something there, which is really stupid.
Well, it's also that, here's another component, is that the people that are watching, the guys that watch Star Wars, and it is guys, I'm sorry, but yeah, there are women that watch the old movies, but Star Wars is effectively a medieval story told in space. That's it. Even George Lucas said this. It's not like they're reinventing the wheel here. It's the most classic story you can ever hear. And so really, who do you think's buying all the lightsabers? Who do you think's going around fighting with lightsabers in 2003? Me and every other guy in the neighborhood. Were there a bunch of girls doing that? No, it's guys. You have to understand that there are certain types of media that have a male and a female audience by the nature of the way that they are. That's it. It's just, and it's totally normal. It's okay. That's nothing wrong with that.
Well, but that's the problem, right? Is you're taking a brand that was predominantly for boys, and he's right about George talking about how it's a medieval story in space, it's timeless, and George has also said it's for 12-year-olds. 12-year-old boys is the sort of the main demographic, right? Which I have a 12-year-old boy, and there's lots of things that we both like. As a grown man, he's a kid, but we still, if he was 5 or 6, maybe not so much, but as a 12-year-old, 100%. Those types of stories. He's started to getting into The Hobbit here and stuff like that, reading it. So, yeah, are there girls that like Star Wars? Sure, but you're doing yourself a disservice by trying to change it, and then you're doing that based on a cause that you made up in your head that actually doesn't even exist. So from day one, it's a complete disaster, and it's very, very stupid. And Asmongold is telling it like it is, and that's just the way it is. Like when you look at those old videos, like I've been doing videos lately, like I showed the one of Attack of the Clones, for example, the theater, right, the opening showing, and all the people with lightsabers and stuff, and they lit them and hold them up. Yeah, there's some girls, there is, but it's mostly dudes. Let's not kid ourselves. It's mostly dudes. And the other thing you notice too is it's like we can't make things for girls unless we change something that's made for boys or is more boy-centric. That's a very, very stupid thing to do. Very, very stupid thing to do. Why don't you just make a new thing? They do it all the time. There's tons of brands for girls. But you decided to take something that was more boy-centric and tried to make it a girl brand. Why would you do that? You bought it because it was a boy brand, didn't you, Disney? Because isn't that what you wanted? Isn't that what Iger said? Was that they had Disney princesses and they needed something more boy-centric? Not that Disney doesn't have some boy stuff, but most of it is either girly stuff or for both. Right? Like, what's the big movie? Was it Inside Out or whatever? I would argue that's for girls and boys. And then they also have the Disney princess stuff that's specifically more for girls. So, like, I don't understand why you would want to change Star Wars. That just doesn't even make any sense.
J.J. Abrams was coaxed back to tell a story he didn't really want to tell, desperately trying to undo the damage done by TLJ, only to produce an absolute Frankenstein's monster of a film in Rise of Skywalker. Reviews were terrible.
That's the last one, right? The final movie? I don't remember even what it was called.
Well, and that's a good thing, Asmongold. You're a blessed soul for not remembering anything about it.
With the movie business in tatters, Kennedy and Lucasfilm retreated to TV, where they scored a surprise hit with The Mandalorian,
yeah, it did
mostly
really well.
because it had Jon Favreau at the helm. The success wasn't to last, though, and failures like Boba Fett and Obi-Wan Kenobi failed to capitalize on its success.
I thought Obi-Wan Kenobi was popular. I don't remember that at all. Can they go back and redo the films? I don't think they should do that. I think the focus they should have should be on making a new story. Like, I've always thought they should do something inside of the scope of the Old Republic.
Kenobi was popular viewership-wise. It was. Because it had Kenobi and Darth Vader in it. But even that one ended up being a huge disappointment and pissed people off. A lot of nonsensical stuff. A lot of lore-breaking. Asmon's not like an avid Star Wars fan, right? Part of the reason I did this is because he's kind of more the normie. But it was a popular show. He was aware of that. I don't want them to do anything in the Old Republic at all. And the thing is, now even if you do, it all leads to the sequels. The sequels are the final thing in the timeline. So you can't even really bury them. You know, even with this Starfighter movie coming out, you can't, even though it takes place after the sequels, it's like, it would take years and decades of content post-sequels to make people forget about the sequels. And they're the episodic films, and they have, Skywalkers in them. So it's just not, you can't. So I disagree with Asmon on this. Yes, redo them. Sell it and have somebody else redo them properly and do it right. 100%. Get rid of all the Disney crap and start over. It's the only way. Because you'll never be able to forget where it all goes.
Willow, a 1980s fantasy movie, was brought back in a baffling TV...
I forgot all about them bringing back Willow. I totally did. I feel like every fantasy movie now is garbage. It's just been infected with so many people that want to use fantasy to tell their own story rather than tell a story that's like worthwhile and like relatable. I think they're all so bad nowadays. It did? I think it did.
Yeah, well, that's just it. She's a facilitator. A lot of these people are. So she's saying, yeah, make your own version of Willow that sucks. And then they go and they do that. I didn't watch it, but apparently there's like a L couple or something. I don't know. But... not that that would necessarily ruin anything, just that in and of itself. But apparently there's just a lot of cringeworthy stuff when it comes to that that's in there. But, you guys let me know. I didn't watch it. I was so pissed at that point and with Lucasfilm, and I was just like, you know what? I have my Willow. I have the original. I love it. I don't need this one. And is Mad Mardigan even in the show? Didn't they do some weird tie-in, but it was just really stupid? Let me know in the comment section.
Show about a pair of lesbians
modernizers,
so disastrously awful that Disney ended up scrubbing it from their servers and memory holing it. Mm-hmm. To this day, there's no legal way to view it online.
What? It was that bad? Holy shit. I just thought it was bad.
No, Asmongold. It wasn't just bad. It was the worst, apparently. It was so bad. But keep in mind, too, I haven't watched it, so I can't say whether it was worse than The Last Jedi, but I do know that no one watched it, and that was a big reason they took it off as well. Yes, Drinker's right. It did feature that cringy stuff. I did hear about that. And the plot was terrible. It was a crappy show, but sometimes crappy shows get views. Like Kenobi got views, even though it was a crappy show. But apparently Willow was doing really poorly with views as well. Probably in part because word of mouth was don't watch this pile of pus. But that would have been part of the reason why they scrubbed it. But it is pretty funny. I don't know what it costs to keep a show on Disney Plus. So I don't know if just the viewership alone is the reason you don't keep it on there. Because I'm sure there's movies on there and stuff that get hardly any views every day that they're just on there anyway. So I don't know, but it's gone. and once again, Asmongold, you're blessed in the fact that you didn't even remember it existed.
Indiana Jones was defrosted for one last adventure, mostly in the hopes of replacing him with a younger female alternative.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
It didn't work, and despite massively
yeah.
expensive reshoots to try to fix it, the movie flopped at the box office. The biggest humiliation for Kennedy was yet to come, though. The Acolyte, a show that will live...
This was the end. This show made more content. Like, there's a good chance that Critical Drinker might have made more money making videos about the Acolyte than the Acolyte made.
He's probably right about that. He might have, man. A lot of people made a lot of money off of that show because of how absolutely terrible it was. Which has got to be a real slap in the face if you're the person that made it, and then all these YouTubers and stuff are making all this money ripping it, and for you it's a failure and you don't get another season. Like that's gotta hurt, man, bad.
It's pretty impressive.
In Star Wars, it was really as long as Hollywood exists. A pair of strong, diverse female leads, lesbian space witches, weak men getting humiliated. It was all there, and it was all terrible. And in a way, it represents the final form of Kennedy's vision for Star Wars, and it was utterly eviscerated by everyone. The backlash was so bad that even Disney had to step in and promise not to make any more. Now, if you're spotting a theme here of Kennedy resurrecting old IPs and using them as a launchpad for diverse new girl boss replacements, then believe me, you're not alone.
Put a chick in it, make her gay!
She'd gambled some of the biggest
I forgot that the South Park character was based off of her.
Franchises in Hollywood history on the modern audience, and wow, did she lose big. To paraphrase Chris Gore, she took boy brands that everyone could enjoy and turned them into girl brands that nobody enjoyed.
That's right. Star Wars is for guys. It is. I'm sorry, but if you have a bunch of guys that are fighting for honor, tradition, and duty, and they're running around with laser beam swords cutting other people in half, your audience is men. That's it. That's your main audience is guys.
Yup, and it just makes absolutely no sense. What were they thinking? What was Kathleen Kennedy thinking? This brings me back to the theory. Maybe George had a sense that they were going to bury it, and then his stuff would just be viewed as absolute pinnacle in comparison, which it is. There was no way they were going to make something better than the prequels doing what they did. So you got to wonder if that theory is true.
Men felt excluded and disrespected, and women felt patronized and pandered to.
I don't know if disrespected was the word, because I didn't go into it thinking they needed to respect me as much as I just wanted the story to work and be cohesive and make sense, right? Like that was more what it was for me. The women feeling pandered to, I can totally see that because they're not stupid. They know that Rey having just totally crazy exaggerated force powers was a pandering. They know that every character in the movie revolving everything around Rey and her being the best at literally everything, and no one was better than her at pretty much anything. I thought Poe might have been the number one pilot, but they took that away from him as well, and she ended up being, in Rise of Skywalker, oh, where's Rey? We can't do anything without Rey. And meanwhile, he's like a total crazy awesome pilot. But so they gave her that too. So I think women aren't dumb. They're going to notice that and be like, wait a minute, like I can't relate to this. I'm not just the best at everything all the time. What? This is weird. And I don't know. I think some guys maybe felt disrespected, but it was so comically bad, like that they were using the male characters to try and prop up the female characters rather than just writing good female characters. Like it was so comically stupid that I don't know. I mean, I guess I feel disrespected, but it's like I can't even bring the word respect even into the conversation because it was so beyond dumb that I wouldn't even know where to begin.
The modern audience had failed to show up and the existing audience was abandoning ship. Kennedy's greatest gamble had failed.
Well, and what's crazy about that too is like, why would Kathleen Kennedy take that kind of a risk with Star Wars? Like, you're talking about a multi-billion-dollar purchase. This wasn't like some cult classic, we paid, $50 million for something, some, like, for example, if they had just bought Willow, right? Not the whole company, just the rights to do Willow. Like, what would that have costed? Something like that, right? Like 20 to 50 million or something like that. Okay, sure, take the gamble. Do your dumb little cause thing and woman power thing and see how it goes. Right? Sure. If I was an executive, I'd say, you know what? For something like that, have at her. But the fact that she was allowed to try and manipulate a brand that was so established or manipulate the people who are customers of said brand when it's multi-billions of dollars that you're risking. And it's not just the purchase price. It's the losses, right? So you're paying $4 billion for it. That's the first thing. But the other thing is you want returns. You want to keep selling all this merch. You want to have all this stuff continue and then try and grow upon it, as difficult as that might be at the level it was at. You wouldn't be taking that kind of a risk. That's just stupid. That's just bad business. Even if the risk was worth it. You would pick something smaller to take that risk with and see where the chips fall. You wouldn't take an IP at that level, or you wouldn't do that with Marvel. You wouldn't do that with anything. That's just really dumb. Because you bought those things for a reason. And if all the reason was to try and change it to something else at the level that those are at and at the cost that they incurred is just really stupid. And I can't believe the board allowed it too. Like they're to blame too. She should never have been around as long as she was after what we saw happen. It was ridiculous.
And inevitably, it all finally caught up with her. For years, there had been rumours of her retirement, false starts and conspiracy theories. But one thing was obvious. Kennedy wasn't going anywhere until she was damn well good and ready. And on January 15th, the day finally came. Kathleen Kennedy was stepping down as president of Lucasfilm.
It's really crazy to watch the Star Wars, like if you go back and you watch the prequel lightsaber fights, I really think that it is still like the Obi-Wan versus Anakin Skywalker in the end of the prequels. Everybody knew that it was building up to this. Everybody knew this was going to happen. From the moment that the first movie came out, everybody knew the conclusion is going to be him becoming Darth Vader. We all knew this. They even used it as like promotional material for like posters in the first movie. And it finally comes out like it was, and it's actually as good as people thought it was going to be. It is the best fight in the entire fucking series, in my opinion. I think it is.
Well, I got to disagree with Asmongold on that one, only because to me it was just too much. It's too much. And in the same way, there's people that praise it for being whatever it was, 25 minutes long or whatever like that. I actually, I'm on the other side. I think it was too much. And it didn't flow right with their fight in A New Hope, in my opinion. And I know you could make the argument, well, Obi-Wan's an old guy and, they can't jump around and do the things they used to do. Vader's in the suit now. And I get those arguments. Those aren't necessarily wrong arguments, actually, at all. But even if that was true, I still think the Revenge of the Sith, Obi-Wan and Anakin fight was just too much. And I don't think it needed to be like that. It didn't need to be that crazy. Like, they're jumping on little droid heads over the lava and floating on them. And maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm just more of a traditionalist. I would have preferred a more classic style sword fight. I think that matched better with Star Wars in general. Because even Duel of the Fates, right? That is a very intense lightsaber battle. But they're not, like, they're in a room. There's danger, right? There's a big crevice or big, hole that they could fall through. There's all those types of things. But they're in that room and they're fighting. Even before that, when they're in the whatever generator area or whatever like that, there's danger and they are jumping around and stuff. But I felt like that was kind of the limit. Like, any further than that, and it starts to not flow into the OT that great for me, and also just becomes kind of just too exaggerated. So that, for me, is why I felt like the Revenge of the Sith fight was just a little too much. It's definitely the best movie of the three, and I still watch it, and I still think it's great, but I do think that lightsaber duel was too much. As far as the, knowing we were going to get to there, I say this to people all the time. George was smart in the sense that he knew that you could do prequels with Anakin and with Vader because of who Vader was. And I say this to people all the time that try and compare other prequels and say, oh, well, we knew what was going to happen with this character and you didn't seem to care and all this stuff, like with the shows and stuff. And it's like, no, but you can't compare the level of iconic villain Vader is to some other character. It doesn't work. It just doesn't. Like you can't do a trilogy about just any old villain that's a prequel when you know where it's going to end. It worked because it was Darth Vader. It wouldn't have worked for somebody else. I mean, and not that it wouldn't work for anybody else. There might be some other character out there where it would work. But it doesn't work. It worked because Vader, guys, and he's right. I mean, leading up to it, we all knew, but we didn't care because, geez Louise, this is Darth Vader.
And then even before that, Yoda. The thing is that Yoda was supposed to be the super powerful Jedi Master, way more powerful than Obi-Wan Kenobi, or even more powerful than Darth Vader, and or even Palpatine, and nobody knew what the fuck was going to happen. And then the moment that he fought Count Dooku, it was just as good as people thought it was going to be. It was. The fact that to have literally 20 or 30 years of, pressure, expectations, and nostalgia, and then completely fucking meet it. Cinema. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I just did a video about that the other day, right? The top guy at ILM talking about it, how he went to a theater on opening night, and I think it was San Diego, I want to say, and he was nervous that people would think it was stupid, and the theaters went nuts. I mean, I have comments under that video from so many people saying that their theater, much like his theater, which we had the footage for, went nuts. To the point where people are commenting on that video telling me that they couldn't hear the movie at all for the entire fight until the scene ended because they were so excited. And obviously, I'm gonna, bring my complaints and thoughts. I didn't like the way Yoda was jumping around. I thought Yoda, like Palpatine, should be beyond lightsabers with their power levels. That's just me. I like that difference, right? There's the Jedi Knight guys, and there's guys like Yoda that are so crazy powerful they don't even waste their time with lightsabers. That's just my personal feelings. But I can see why people went nuts, and they did go nuts. So I can't make the argument that was a bad decision. And when you talk to people that are into the prequels, that's one of the highlights for them. And in fact, even some of the people that have some problems with the prequels, that for them is one of the highlights. So I have my opinion on it, but my opinion is definitely not the majority opinion. Although there were also some people that commented as well saying that they didn't really like that either. But a lot of people love that, Asmongold obviously being one of them. And again, he's not like this hardcore crazy Star Wars fan. He is a big fan, but he's kind of more of a normie. And I think those people just absolutely love it. And that's also what's funny about this whole video and Kathleen Kennedy and everything that Disney's done with Star Wars is that even the normies walked away. Even the normies walked away. Like, the guys like me, I'm sort of overanalyzing and kind of bitching and moaning. But the people that are normies that just love it and that type of thing gets them going, they have also now walked away based on the horrible decision-making of Disney.
She was gone, sure, but she left behind her a studio in absolute shambles, all of its IPs drained of their goodwill and cultural reputation. There was nothing left to save from her because she'd nuked all of it. And now that the dust is settled and all is said...
Yeah, one more thing is that the guys that did the lightsaber choreography, they were so good at doing it for the prequels that they had to slow down because they thought the kids wouldn't be able to keep up.
Yeah, well, it was the choreography and it was also the effort put in by... one example is Ray Park and Ewan McGregor. That scene is literally slowed down. They were so good, they had to slow it down because it just didn't look... It was so fast it looked unrealistic, even though it was realistic, right? And apparently Hayden right up there as well. So that is in large part due to the choreography, and then secondarily the huge amount of effort that the actors put in. By the way, speaking of that, the guy, I watched a documentary about The Last Jedi, and the guy that did the choreography for Rey, like, for example, when she's swinging the lightsaber around the stone and stuff, and he actually told her to baseball bat swing like an idiot in that scene. And that is reflected in a lot of those fights, like the one, even in The Force Awakens, there's a lot of, like, just baseball bats swinging. She's very awkward and terrible, and yet still wins. Like, if she had been awkward and terrible and lost that fight, fine by me. That makes perfect sense. She's new to this. She has no idea what she's doing. But then she wins with just this baseball bat style, really sloppy lightsaber dueling. Then after she wins, she's on Octu and swinging it even more stupidly. And the guy and the choreographer's talking about how great it is in the documentary. I was like, bro, why didn't you guys bring the prequel guys back for the... Why are you using this idiot over here? He sucks.
And have you seen a Darth Maul trailer? Well, that's the thing, right? Is like, and I remember I was there fucking at, like, I don't know, 4th grade or something like that. And like Darth Maul, because in the trailer, you know, he has the thing forward and then the fucking, the lights come out of both of them. And I was like, oh shit.
Yeah, well, and that's how we all thought. I can honestly say I don't think I was ever more hyped for a movie. And I like I said, I waited for 16 hours in line for tickets. And that double-bladed lightsaber blew my mind. And that sounds, to some people who don't like Star Wars, they might be like, oh, well, you're a loser. Why would that excite you so much? But it just did. It was so crazy. We were just like, what? And then he's got the makeup, his red tattoo face and the horns and everything. We were like, woo!
Animations are mostly on point. Oh, dude. I remember, how many of you guys were like, you know, we were like young, right? When the Clone Wars came out. That had no business being as good as it was. It was like, it was a cut above everything else that was on Cartoon Network. It's like it came on, it felt like whenever I was watching that, I went from watching a TV show into watching a movie. It was amazing, man.
Okay, so he was in grade 4 in 99. So he was still pretty young when Clone Wars came out. And I think that's one of the things that, like, a lot of people that were sort of younger people, teenagers or whatever, when the Clone Wars came out, have a really, really high view of them. And he mentions it was the best thing on the Cartoon Network. I don't know. It probably was, and that probably contributes to that. I personally have a very difficult time getting into any of the animated stuff. The stuff I have seen, I've been kind of like, eh. So, and it could just be an age thing. Maybe I just can't get into it, right? Like, you know, by the time the Clone Wars was out, I was a grown man doing stuff. So maybe that's part of it. So I just had a really hard time getting into it. Couldn't get into the Bad Batch at all. What was the other one? Rebels. Couldn't get into that at all. But a lot of people do have a very high view of the Clone Wars, and many of them are younger than me. And maybe that's the reason. I don't know. I just thought some of the storylines were kind of dumb too. Just the ones that I know about. But whatever. Disagree with Asmongold on that one.
And Jar Jar Binks' thoughts? I mean, George Lucas needs to tell us what the actual vision was. Because I am a believer. I am 100% a believer. I think that they absolutely had all that planned out, and they roached out on it. They did. They saw like people didn't like him in the first movie. He was too much of like a Darth. I think it's real. And what really sold me on the conspiracy theory was the facial, like whenever he was mouthing the words that other people would say. Because like think about how much time and money it would take to do that in the year like 2000, right, or 1998. Like millions and millions of dollars was invested in this. There's no way they didn't have that as a plan. Facts. Yeah. If you don't know, you got to look it up.
Wait, so is this the theory that they think that the plan for Jar Jar was for George to make him this like super bumbling idiot that's just acting the whole time, and then in reality, they were going to turn him into like a big villain figure? That seems a little hokey to me, just because under who? I don't know, under Palpatine? That doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense to me. But it is funny. It is true. There are things I've seen where there's the mouth movements and stuff. I see why people would think this. And he did have a pretty big role in the first one, and then they just said and kind of brushed him under the carpet for the rest of it. He's in a couple scenes in Attack of the Clones, but I just don't know how that would even have worked. Jar Jar? Because you had Maul, then he dies. I mean, and then Palpatine's basically working on Anakin at that point. I guess it's possible that he had another secret apprentice in Jar Jar? But then it's like, but Jar Jar was a Gungan on Naboo and had no connection to Coruscant or anything like that. You know what I mean? He got kicked out of the Gungans, and then they find him. And he doesn't really have anywhere to go, so they kind of bring him with them, and then he turns into like a helper for Padme, sort of deal. So, yeah, I think that's pretty hokey, but.
And that's another thing too, is that Darth Maul, like, I mean, for all intents and purposes, like, I thought he was dead, right? After the first, I mean, it's kind of obvious he's fucking dead. And so he was so popular and people liked him so much, they literally fucking resurrected him.
Which, in my opinion, is not a good reason to resurrect a character. I think that violates the creative decision to kill them. We killed off this character. We used him for what we needed him to be. He's gone. He's dead. Oh, no, he's popular. We can make money with him. Bring him back. That, to me, violates the creative vision that you had initially, right? And that's one of the problems I have with the Clone Wars, is there's a few things in there that, in my opinion, violate the creative vision of Star Wars. That's a big glaring one, because that one was totally done because of merchandising. Without any, even if you love Darth Maul in the Clone Wars, you cannot argue with me on that. He was dead. He was cut in half. But he sold so many toys. He was like the number one toy everybody wanted. The action figure, that's what everybody wanted, was Darth Maul. Big time. You know, when you make a decision like that, that's clearly not a creative decision, but simply to make more money, that's where I have a problem. Again, I'm not arguing he doesn't have a good storyline in Clone Wars. I've heard that people say he does. Apparently he does. Fine and dandy. That's great. But it is still technically a violation of the creative process for the sake of marketing. It is. Now, again, you can argue that that was a good decision because they did such good things with the character, but that was still why they did it. You can't deny that.
You know who I really hope they flesh out? Is that, like, there can be overlap with this is Count Dooku. I always thought Count Dooku was the most compelling character, especially coming back from a retrospective in the prequels. I thought he was the most compelling and complex character.
Well, and you know, Disney's sort of taken that idea and just completely overdone it, right? So Dooku was a former Jedi, right? You have some great scenes. You have the scene where he's got Obi-Wan captive and he's trying to explain things to him, and Obi-Wan shrugs him off, and you've got him and Yoda, and you've got him and Sidious, and you knew he was a former Jedi. Okay, great. I agree. And then Disney took that, Dave Filoni took that idea, and everyone who is a former Jedi turns into Inquisitors, and there are just so many of these people that just decide to turn dark because they're afraid of death, even though the Jedi aren't supposed to be afraid of death. All those things. And so now Dooku's not as cool. I mean, he is to me, But they just completely oversaturated that whole idea of a Jedi going against what the Jedi believe and then essentially going dark side, but with some other complexities and desire for different styles of governments and things of that nature. So they just took that and just made that a thing for so many characters. And they're doing it again in Shadow Lord because this Jedi chick is going to become the new Darth Talon. Another one. How many do we need? Like, it's just ridiculous that all of these Jedi just completely abandoned what they thought. And then on top of it became Jedi hunters. So they're going to go kill their own kin, their own friends. It makes no sense. Based on somebody growing up in the temple and learning all the things they learned. Dooku, for all intents and purposes, he did not seek out fighting the Jedi. He had encounters with them. He did what he had to do. But if he was just out to just kill a bunch of Jedi, he could have just killed Obi-Wan right there. When he had him, he could have chopped him in half while he was floating in the prison thing. But he didn't, because it was more about the overall goal he had, which was the separatist movement and all those things. So that is cool. But then they took that and turned it into just these killers just for the sake of them being killers that were former Jedi, which was super lame. And again, we've got another one in the new Maul show. Anyway, so he's excited about Shadow Lord. I'm not. I'm not excited about anything they're doing. It's very frustrating, and it just never ends. And just doing the whole protect the child, Jedi goes dark. Now they're combining it into one, right? That's all Disney does, protect the children. So he protects this girl who's getting attacked by the clones in the Empire, and then he takes her under his wing and then turns her dark side. So it's the combo of the protect the child and the Jedi goes dark. I don't find that compelling. It's so overdone, and seeing lightsabers spinning and stuff isn't enough for me, right? I gotta have storylines. I gotta have proper lore, stuff like that. So gotta disagree with Asmongold on that. But, a lot of people are excited for it. Whatever, fine, whatever. But interesting video, and the Critical Drinkers video is really good. And it's just funny because I'd never seen Asmongold comment on Star Wars before, so I wanted to give my reaction to that. Let me know in the comment section what you think. If you like this content, please like, subscribe. Always helps the channel. Feel free to check anything else on my channel. Have yourselves a really good day.